Okay, so I'm just going to switch it into the slide share mode so you guys can read these charts a little bit more easily. Okay, so the first one, we've done this research, this particular module with people before, and we asked people even before we delivered the content, what are the benefits for your business if you're listening to your users more? And these are just little sound bites that people play back, some of which who listen to users a lot, some of which who do very little of it. But you know, there's a lot of things in there around getting clarity around product design, helping the business to grow, building to something that's actually used, you know, give us more potential to have more people signed up, etc., etc. So there are many, many different benefits to the business if you listen to your users more. At the same time, there are some perceived risks from people. So when we say to folks, well, why are you not, or why might you not be doing it as frequently, possibly, as you feel you should be, is things people say, you know, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I'm running my business. I'm a small business and I'm a business owner and I've got, you know, a list of 400 different things, competing priorities. It's just not at the top of the list. Budget, you know, I'm bootstrapping the operation. I don't have budget to do this. Capacity or staffing, I don't have the right people. Or plainly, the one that we hear an awful lot when you pick back, you know, the first three around time, budget, and capacity, oftentimes the real biggest barrier to people starting is they just don't know where to start. So hopefully we'll give you some tips in where to start today. But the rewards are enormous. Whether if you're developing a new product, if you're developing a communication plan, if you're looking to grow the business and really ultimately get yourself a higher return on all of your different investments, user research is just absolute gold dust for any of these pieces as we go through. So you'll see kind of, and obviously the risk of not doing it is tremendously high. So we're going to do a few different pieces as we go through here. The first piece that we're going to talk about is just an insight. So if you're listening to your users and you're hearing commentary about your business or your service, what we would push you guys to look for is have I heard an insight or have I heard a piece of data? Because they're actually quite different things. So an insight to clarify in here is something that's a new understanding of your customer, your market, that will drive a new decision or a new action. Sometimes we hear a piece of data about something and we say, well, somebody, you know, they're not using this because, or they're using, if it's not going to drive action, then actually you're paying for data. That's not particularly helpful. So you want to be listening for two things. One, which is new understanding that you didn't know before. And two, it will drive decision or action. And number two is really important. So as you're starting to listen to your users, almost having an eye to what am I listening for? What am I going to do differently? Am I looking for a new something for, you know, how I'm going to advertise my business for my website? Am I looking for a new feature on the product design? What is the action that you're going to drive, and where's your listening focus to bring that out from the beginning? So those two things make an insight. So you're listening to users and your why. So as we said, that new customer market understanding, driving action for your business, ultimately where we're pushing towards is creating value for your customer, but then importantly for you guys as you run your business, really pushing through, and you'll hear us use the words return on investment continuously through this in here. How does it create value? So again, this is common sense, but sometimes we have to kind of hear these things again. If you make products that customers want to use, it'll attract more people to your business. And if you create messages that really connect with people and they feel heard, it'll convert more people into trying it. So we spend all this time on product design or communications on our websites or advertising, etc. as well. But if it's not something that people ultimately want, and it's not a message that they want to hear, then we're spending a lot of time spinning our wheels. So there's a few examples we're going to take you through here. This is a great one. You may have heard from Capital One. It's from the States, but we heard this one on a podcast. It's a fantastic example of how insight can help make your customers drive your product design. So in this case, it was banking. So they identified an insight at the beginning. And so their theory or their hypothesis was that senior banking customers didn't want to use internet banking. And the team's hypothesis around the why was they felt that senior customers were really concerned about cybersecurity, somebody grabbing their details, somebody, you know, logging into their bank accounts. However, when they went and unpacked and interviewed their users, they listened further and they probed super deeply. And what they really realized was that the pain point on online banking was actually these customers were worried about they themselves making a mistake. So yes, there were some cybersecurity concerns, but really their biggest worry was, what if I log in and I make the wrong transaction? What if I log into the wrong account? What I don't know what I'm doing. So this drove new customer understanding. So they were able to create a new demo site where people could log in and actually practice. Really super easy, super quick. And but the point is they could gain confidence before making a real transaction. So in this case, again, if we go back to the two things we're looking for, new understanding, driving action, in here, what they needed practice in order to feel confident. And then the other piece clearly that they were listening for as well is clearly people didn't want to spend, evenings and weekends trying to figure this thing out. They wanted quick and they wanted it easy. So they wanted to time. So Capsule One were able to take two actions in here. Sorry, these Zoom controls are covering up all my things. They were able to do the demo site, and they were able to put videos together for people so they could kind of like little micro learning videos, quick snapshots, YouTube pieces, enrolling on your bank's website, small things that they could do quickly and then demo afterwards. So they made a product or a service that they were able to tag on. So in this case, if you think about the insight drove value, the new understanding that customers want to practice, they want to learn quickly, they're feeling a bit unconfident, they drove the action on how the product was made. So the demo site and the micro learning videos, massive ratings and huge increases in senior customer retention and attraction. If you think about this, if they had acted on their hypothesis that it was cybersecurity, they'd have a huge expensive cybersecurity action plan that didn't actually address the barrier that was there. The barrier was actually helping the customer to build confidence. So you can see how hypothesis would have driven one sequence of actions, but the actual insight from the users drove something that was entirely different. So this is a chart. If you take nothing else from the presentation today, this is the chart that we'd love you guys to have in here. So it's the risk. So if you think about when people make products that we think customers want, when we're making messages what they think they want to hear, we're making assumptions about what we think is best without that insight. So if the increasing risk to your business, if we don't know anything about our users, we're going to deliver a product that they might not want. We've lost investment developing it, and we've lost the opportunity to the business. So the return on investment of listening to your user massively reduces that risk going forward. So if you think about the risk profile, starts out high and it comes down. Every time you talk to a user and you listen to what they're saying, and you're listening for that new understanding and that new action that drives business, your return on investment is getting better and better as it goes through. We'll talk a little bit in a while as well about how you can do that. Just two more quick case studies. One which I'm sure many of you will know, our friends at Kodak did not as much listening, so they were clearly a leading imaging company, well out in front. Business model was particularly built on the photographic film for cameras, the consumable that went on the inside. This is how they made their revenue, was the film on the inside. But they did identify way back in the 1980s, a hell of a long time ago, the potential for an electronic photography. And they did some research and they learned that customer would want digital cameras, and it would take roughly about 10 years, but obviously a huge risk to their consumable business model for selling the film. So they had the tech in-house. They had an engineer, the IP was all written up by them. But instead of embracing the new insight and listening to the users, and instead of embracing the new technology, they made the choice to see digital as the enemy, fought against it, and stayed close to film. And clearly the rest is history. The majority of cameras today use digital technology, and they filed for Chapter 11 in 2012. So a huge loss to the business. So, we'll continue to say listening to users will help you ensure your business provides value to the customer over time, and keeping an eye on that, because these things change. Another really great example from Nike, the Fly Ease, which was launched about 18 months ago. Another great product in here. So their insight, they received a letter actually from a customer who was disabled and who was moving away and going to university and wanted to be more independent. When they listened further and interviewed him and observed and probed more deeply, what they were able to see actually was the loss of independence was really driven by a technical pain point. And the pain point was the lack of stability putting on your shoe. So if you can imagine putting on a traditional shoe, it's usually a two-handed operation, and we're either sitting down or standing up against something. So what they were looking for was a way to get the shoe easy on and easy off, and actually enable people with a little bit more independence. So what they were looking for was hands-free application and no lace footwear. So they've invented what they've called this bi-stable hinge, which you'll see in the middle of the shoe, that keeps the shoe stable whether it's open or closed. So it kind of goes into an open position, and you can slide your foot in there. So they were listening, and listening here again meant two things. People needed stability technically, so there was a technical pain point, but there was an emotional pain point, because the loss of stability for a certain group of customers was loss of independence and freedom. So the things to be listening for in all of your business design is around kind of what we would call functional needs. In this case, it's stability, but then emotional needs. So if we go back to Capital One, the big emotional need of feeling vulnerable and loss of confidence in there. So what are those functional needs? What are those emotional needs that you should be looking for? So again, Nike took their understanding, made their products, they got their bi-stable hinge. But actually, if you look at their communication campaign, they're not talking necessarily about customers with disabilities, because the real benefit in here is independence and freedom, something which everybody can kind of relate to. So the imagery, the iconography, etc., and how these examples are presented is all of the semiotics and the culture of that will all relate to independence and freedom. So it's a really nice execution. So in here, the new understanding was they want stability and independence. It drove action and how the product was made, and ultimately how it was communicated as well. So again, better listening, the risk of inventing that new shoe, the risk of inventing that campaign, risk level comes down, return of investment conversely goes up. So the next bit that we're going to just talk about quickly is, what on earth do you mean by new understanding, and what is it about this insight? So we're looking for the new understanding, and then we're going to try to drive decision within our business. A new understanding can be a range, as you can imagine, a range of different things. But what it isn't is just new information. So it cannot just be a piece of data. So a lot of times companies are buying reams and reams and reams of data. So something like 73% of Starbucks website views are on mobile versus desktop. It's data. It's not yet an insight, because it's not telling us to do anything differently if we were Starbucks. Or you can have observational data. Pictures of customers' kitchens show they keep vitamins next to coffee machines when they're on the counter. Data, solid data, but not an insight. It's not driving action for us yet. And again, customer preference data. People like red lipstick. Again, it's a fact, it's a piece of data, but it's not an insight. It's not driving new understanding, and it's not driving, really importantly, action for the business. So what we would always help clients to do is to take the data and ask the why. So why are each of these things happening? And it's the why that generally will help to drive action for the business. So you'll see on the left over here, what we're saying is this is just data and information. Whereas in the right, with the blue, it starts to explain the why. So hopefully you'll see the kind of the mindset shift as we move from left to right. So if we take our Starbucks data, that 73% of the website views are on mobile, let's ask them why. Well, the reason that they're using it on mobile is because they're ordering coffee on the go. So they're going to pick it up on the go. So again, if they're ordering coffee while they're on the train and they're going to come through, then obviously, Starbucks can place advertising on the train if that's where they are when they're doing the mobile. So it can drive different decision making, different action planning. Or our coffee example. So very interesting, coffee and vitamins sit together. Why? Well, actually, the reason consumers or customers are doing that is because they're tethering habits, and they know if they put the vitamins next to the coffee, they'll remember it. So again, if you're that vitamin company, or can you do some co-merchandising with coffee? Can you do some sampling on the back of a coffee pack? Can you talk about the benefits of coffee and vitamins together? So all of these things would drive different actions for that business. Or red lipstick. Why? Obviously, clearly, there's many different shades of red, but in this case, what they were saying was customers like bold shades of red because it gives them a dramatic look when they're going out at night. Interesting. Okay, so if red equals nighttime lipstick wearing, what's the ecosystem around nighttime, and how do we do sampling, or how do we do package design? Should the package design be more glamorous? Should it be darker colors? Should it be, so you can start to build the full nighttime experience rather than just a lipstick in isolation. You can look for real points of difference in that way. I'm going to pause here. Any questions? Because we're going to talk about where you guys can go to get these insights. Okay. So where can they come from? I mean, there's so many different places where you guys can get your insights. But ultimately, they come from analyzing and interpreting data either from your customer or from your market. And that can come from lots of different places. So you can do customer research, and we'll talk a bit about quantitative, which is bigger base sizes. We'll talk about qualitative, which is smaller base sizes, but going much deeper. And then doing things like social listening, which is, or, you know, kind of listening on different platforms to see where those natural conversations are happening. You can buy syndicated reports. I'm sure many of you are you know, marketed to by people selling these reports of kind of macro trends in your industry or category reports that you can get your hands on. Or you can buy kind of category data, which is kind of shopper panel data that could be retailer specific or data and analytics. So it's kind of sector specific, but they broadly kind of bucket into those three groups. The piece we're going to have a look at is the customer research on the next few charts. So if you want to listen to your users, there's kind of three different mediums in which you'll be able to do this. And they each have, no one of them is better or worse than the other. It depends on what it is that you want to find out and what action you're going to take. So that number 1, 2, that we talked about from the beginning, you know, what is it that you want to know and what action are you going to take? And then that will help to kind of you to select the methods in here. So quantitative data is typically larger base sizes of customers. So you can kind of place surveys amongst 50s or hundreds of people, typically a questionnaire. And what you're looking for in here, the benefit of doing this is you might be looking for things that are statistically significant. So if you've got option A, B, or C in your product design and you're looking at different features and you want to know which feature to go away, you know, quantitative data will help you kind of make a very robust, sound decision in there. So it'll help you to understand which product or which piece of, you know, if you've mocked up a kind of a website and which one do people like or which one are they kind of navigating more easily. Qualitative is different. So you'll have much smaller base sizes of your target customer, but the benefit of qualitative is that you can go much deeper. So you can do single and multi-person discussions, smaller is better typically, and you can start to really dig into the why. Things that would be hidden in the numbers and the quantitative data, you can really dig into here, and you can get to those what we call the emotional needs and the functional needs that we talked about earlier on again, which are, we tend to typically use qualitative first to try and figure out what is it that people want and why they want it. And then you might use quantitative a little bit later to potentially confirm some of those hypotheses or do some of your product testing, etc. Qualitative is gold dust at the beginning of kicking something off. But, you know, really learning about the experiences, unpicking the emotions, the life context, it's really important. And then lastly, social listening. So this is tracking or what they call scraping online conversation around online forums and social media. This benefit here is obviously you can combine bigger numbers. So it gives a sense of that kind of quantitative robustness. But you can really kind of do some what they call sentiment analysis. So what are the emotions people are using when they talk about your product or service or your competitor's product or service? And that gives you a feeling for the kind of qualitative feel. So social listening, again, can be very actionable. It's also relatively cost effective if that's what you want to pursue for your business as well. So yeah, I mean, we're coming towards the kind of the closing parts of the presentation in here, just to insights, understand the why. So if you take your customer and your market information, the insight comes from the analysis and the interpretation, the interrogation of that for the why. And then that why creates a new understanding that then can drive new action for your business and really think through kind of what's coming next for you. Again, the one chart to remember, we leave it with you one more time. As your research and your insight goes up, the risk to your business is coming down because you're making the good bets, solid bets on things that you feel are really data-based. And then value, I've just got a little template in here for you as well. So again, about getting started, you know, we can send these slides out to you guys afterwards, but you can see that the case studies that we worked on for Capital One and Nike are in here. So if we look at the hypothesis around Capital One again really quickly, their hypothesis going in was a big worry about cybersecurity. When they dug deeper, they actually heard they were worried about making the mistakes themselves. The action that I highlighted were 2, a practice demo site and micro-learning videos, and the value it brought, retention and trial, versus something like a big cybersecurity program that, ultimately wouldn't have been in here. So, even if you wanted to scope this out for your own business around kind of my hypothesis around my users is, if I'm digging in and I'm hearing deeply, am I confirming the hypothesis, or is it something different? What action am I going to take? And then what value it's going to bring, just to making sure that your research and your user understanding is really pushing. Sometimes we can do user understanding. It's all very interesting, but if it's not really bringing business value, then it's not going to help. I feel like I've been talking to myself for 27 minutes. So if anybody has a question.
Thanks, Deirdre. I haven't got any questions on the chat facility, but if anybody, I know there's a lot covered there. Oh, we've got a few come off mute, so hopefully there'll be a few questions. Anyone got anything they'd like to ask now?
I've got a couple. I put one on the chat actually. One was how effective is the use of customer focus groups in a B2B sort of environment?
Yeah, we're doing one for a client actually at the moment. I'm going to put the focus group as a part B. Part A, I mean, just any user research with your customers. Again, return on investment, risk is coming down and return on investment is going up. Absolutely. How you do that will depend. I mean, so we were just doing a piece of work for a pharma company, and they wanted to talk to healthcare practitioners, people working in the NHS, etc. They were really difficult to recruit because they're busy. And, so what we ended up doing was one-on-one Zoom videos, a bit like we are doing now, just with them one-on-one. So we had to do it at times that suited them, typically in the evening. And well, we would have loved to have had an hour of their time. They all told us no, but we got 30 minutes. So we kind of just made that 30 minutes in the evening work really hard for us. And we worked with a recruiter to get those people. So to answer your question, yes, it's critical. If we had to do that in a focus group environment and try and get 4 of them all at the same time, it just would have been nigh on impossible to get all of them together, I think, from a coordination. The other downside of focus groups is sometimes people, they're not particularly, they won't lie to you, but they won't mean to lie to you, but they're surrounded by people that they don't know. If you're doing it face to face, they're in an environment probably they've never been in before. It just, everybody's natural defenses are kind of going up. Half an hour with somebody at home in Zoom where they've their socks, their shoes are off and they've got a cup of tea in their hand. I think they're likely to be much more open with you possibly, and it's much more flexible for you to schedule it. So I wouldn't worry too much about focus groups. I would, preference for us on Quali is generally one-on-one. I say that sometimes you can get a paired interview, you can kind of get people to spark off one another, but again, that's more if that dynamic helps you to get to where you want to go kind of thing. But if you're looking for deep needs or it's hard to schedule and stuff, I think one-on-ones would be a really good rule of thumb to start with.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have a question at all?
I've got another if nobody else is coming forward. When you mentioned social listening, Deirdre, is there tech available for this that you can actually use technology to help what conversations content is?
I believe so. I'm not an expert. We have 3 or 4 freelancers that do our social listening with us, and I would highly recommend any of them. We find it, for me, if I had to go away and upskill on social listening on top of everything, it would take me an awful long time and I wouldn't be as good as they are. It's really cost effective. So at least I'm just thinking about a couple of the freelancers we work with. Some of them are maybe £200 a day, up to £500 a day, maybe up to £700 a day if they have tons of experience. But, this is where you can kind of go on LinkedIn. You could type in social listening researcher. It'll probably spit out hundreds of different names and you could start to zoom in on different people your experience. So if it's not something that you have firsthand experience of yourself, I'd grab maybe 1 or 2 freelancers and see what they, you could set them up with a similar brief and see what they come back to you with. Obviously, they'll only be as good as the brief that you set them. But for us, it's a massively cost-effective way. And actually just having another brain on a project, it's really, really helpful. So we have 3 or 4 now that we just keep going back to on rotation. But obviously it's an emerging space. There probably, and to answer your question, there probably is tech. I just wouldn't know what to recommend.
Hi, I've got a question. Thank you for that presentation. It was really good. I've got a question around the Nike example that you gave. You mentioned that they received an initial email from one of their customers about the shoe not quite working for them. What was the next step that they took after that to kind of try and work out whether this was a wider problem? Because I suppose when we receive a bit of insight, so I work at Health and Her, and we develop an app.
I know Kate, actually. Kate's
yes.
Yeah, okay.
She did mention, yes, yeah. And we receive a lot of insight or feedback, I should say, on a daily basis. I suppose one of the challenges I find is, when you get a bit of insight, how do you then determine whether it's a wider problem? What's the best next step to take after that, I suppose? Because you're constantly looking to improve your features, and you might hear something and go, yeah, I actually see where they're coming from. But before you kind of pass that on to the development team and the product team and develop it further and put that time in, you want to check whether it's a wider issue, I suppose.
Yeah, completely.
Would you say then?
It's brilliant. If you are interested in the Nike example, there's tons of YouTube stuff out there and interviews with the designers and stuff. They've done a really nice job of actually kind of, packaging that case study. If you're to believe everything they say, I mean, clearly they picked up the phone the following morning and phoned this individual. I don't know exactly kind of, time ramifications, but looking at it from the outside in, I think they probably did have a conversation with that person to understand exactly what was going on. And that's where what's really interesting is kind of combining different sources of data. So if we come back up, this one here. Obviously a letter from one person clearly falls into the qualitative camp. They might have interviewed a couple of other people in similar positions. And then you could imagine they either placed a survey to see kind of how broad these issues were, or in that case, I would imagine there was publicly available information that was quantitative. So how many people suffer from this condition, what age range they're in, there's probably a lot of public, there's a lot of data that's just actually out there. You just need to ask Google in the right way and it spits it out for you. So I would imagine that they were able to then kind of assess the size of prize, which I think is what you're pointing to is, is this one person or is it more mainstream than that? But I think what's good about the quali is that you can understand the depth of emotion. And then with the quanti, you can start to figure out, okay, how many people are likely to be feeling this way? I think what's really, really interesting, though, about the Nike example is that while the story goes that they designed it for this one individual, and obviously anybody who identifies with that same situation, anybody will identify with wanting to throw their shoes on quickly, whether you're running down the stairs with a basket of laundry or you're running out the door and you've got things in your hand. So I think what they had was clearly a clear design target and what we would call a shadow target, which is other people with similar needs, but maybe for different reasons. And then suddenly the size of prize effectively becomes double or triple or even more versus what you have. But yeah, I think it's just interrogating all the data. And, like anything we always say with any business is identifying your learning plan. It's never, this work is never done. So it's just, what's the most important question that we need to answer for this period of time? Let's answer it. What will happen during that user research, as you can well imagine, is it'll spit out 3 or 4 more. Oh, why? Okay, well, we didn't ask, you know what I mean? So you have to kind of keep going back. And it's like, we often liken it to a bit of an archaeological dig. Is, the first piece of user research you do, you're kind of digging, am I digging in the right place? Am I digging with the right person? And then you'll find something and you think, crikey, I've just found, this fossil. If I found this fossil, there's probably more, and you'll keep going. And so that's what you'll start doing is you'll start toggling between your different methods. Quali for the depth, okay, I need to get more emotion because this all feels a bit fact-based. You'll get the emotion and then you'll be looking for size of prize. You'll jump over to quantitative. And then you'll say, okay, well, what can I get kind of for free? What's going on already that are out there? What are people saying about my competition? A bit of social listening to kind of complement it. And suddenly the whole thing starts to sing kind of in harmony together. And you've got different levers to pull effectively in here. But rather than get bamboozled by which method, we just literally came off a call with a client and they were like, we want to use this method. We kept saying, but what's the question? What do you want to, but we want to use that method. We're like, okay, we hear you. What question do you want to answer? And they're like, oh yeah, oh. And then they said the question, we're like, don't you know that already? You told us this. And like, we kind of know that bit, but we don't know this bit. And we're like, aha. Now we know what question we want to answer. We're like, I'm not sure that's the best method actually to do it. If you want to know that, we'd go this way. You know what I mean? So it's constantly going, and we know what it's like. You're running your own business day to day. There's 400 things that you need. It's very difficult to zoom in on one most critical thing. So we don't, we're not trying to belittle the thinking or the bets that you have, but I guess our modus operandi is little and often, and the more you do it, then it's like a fitness, you start to build muscle, I think, in this area, and then it becomes, and then the risk, and then the organization becomes less averse to placing the research and gets more adept at reading and actioning the output. So if every time you run a research and you take 3 actions, then you can prove to anybody that it was worth doing, even if it's stopping something. You say, okay, we're not going to go with that feature, nobody liked it, at least I think, isn't it? So does that answer
It does, yeah. No, that makes sense.
Sometimes it's just the inertia of getting started.
Yes, yeah. And just going back to the focus group question as well. So I recently ran some focus group sessions, actually, just online. We had 2 participants in them, a couple of different ones. Is there like a minimum number? They were actually, I should go back a step. So I ran 3 sessions in total, and there were 2 participants in each one. Some of them were better than others. Again, based on what you mentioned earlier, it depends I suppose how forthcoming they want to be with kind of giving their opinion and suggestions and ideas. But is there like a minimum number of people that you'd suggest in these focus groups, or is it really kind of very dependent upon the participants and how willing they are to engage?
Yeah, it really depends on your objective. To start, what's your question? It depends on who you're recruiting. I mean, for you guys on menopause, I think it could go one of 2 ways. Either people could be massively guarded and afraid to say anything, or you could be on there for hours, where people go, and another thing, if you got the right chemistry in the right group, you could be on there for 4 hours, I'd imagine, and so it could work out brilliantly. Rule of thumb for group, I'd say 4. Just even from a note-taking point of view, if you've got them on for an hour or 2, I mean, it's very difficult. And also, I think anything north of 4, and you'll start to get 1 or 2 people who are quiet. And again, if you go back to return on investment, you don't want people quiet in research. You want them to tell you what they think. So 4 is okay. I'm just a bit allergic to groups, if I'm honest. What can groups do? Groups can be good. Do you know when groups are good? Is if you've got the bones of an idea and you want to hear how people are talking about it, and you want to see what this person thinks and that person thinks, or whatever. Yeah,
that's what we did. We were demonstrating a new feature within the app. We had some mock-ups that a designer had put together, and we wanted to show them, and take them through the user journey and explain what it was and get their feedback.
Then it's good. And you hear one person, and then you hear somebody else go, oh, is that how you did it? I didn't see it that way. And you're kind of observing how they're kind of almost teaching one another kind of through it. Like if you were at the very beginning and you were trying to figure out kind of what even this app would do and where the pain points were today and menopause problems, and that feels like a much more one-on-one, deep, emotional conversation. As you say, when you start to come back with mock-ups and people can have stuff to play with, suddenly it becomes more about that than it is about their own deep issues and stuff. And so you can be a little bit more distanced from it, I think, in that case. And these things come down to recruitment at the end of the day, working with the right recruiter and saying, my target is women of a certain age bracket. Maybe there's some socio-demographics in there. And we always say to our recruiters, we want people, particularly for qualitative, who are highly creative and articulate. Because again, and they'll do things in screeners, like ask them, if you're going to travel to Mars tomorrow, what would you put in your packed lunch? Just to see how fast people ask them as they're recruiting them. Because again, when you're in research, you want people who can think on their feet and who can respond. If it takes people a while to form a thought, unfortunately, in research, it does again. Or you could have them in a one-on-one, in which case it's a much more. But if you're in a group environment, you probably want people who are very comfortable in that setting. Again, to make sure that you're getting the most out of them. Hope it's all going well. I haven't seen Cape for ages, actually. So
it is going well, very well. Yeah.
Any other questions or tips or worst case examples? I'm trying to think. Mock-ups are brilliant. Is it Yogita? Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Mock-ups are fantastic. Even if you don't have your final product, if you've got a sketch, if you've got a model, if you've got a website and it's even just a wireframe, just putting something in front of people, and they're like, oh, is that what you mean? Oh yeah, I love it, or I hate it, or whatever. Again, at least stimulus that you can put in front, because we have an example we love telling, and we did some work for a tissue company years ago, and we were saying, well, would you like a round tissue? Would you like a bigger one? And they're like, no, not round. And then we gave them some oval prototypes, and they're all like, oh, I love that. we're like, no, hang on a second, you told us not round. And they're like, no, I quite like oval. So round in our heads meant circle, whereas, so the more, again, we'd have walked away from that saying, to the tech team, cut the round prototypes. But when we put a prototype in their hand, they were like, oh, actually, quite like it. So again, if it's something that's in people's home, the more in context that you can watch, there's some lovely software now out there where you can watch people navigating websites and stuff as well.
Yes.
What people will tell you and what is actually happening is entirely different.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, again, not intentionally, but that's human nature. We don't always remember what we actually do and why. So, some of these kind of modeling, there's a great, very cost-effective research group we work with called Indemo, INDEEMO, Indemo. They started as a social media site and then migrated into user research. So a lot of the interface for people who are doing the research, it feels quite social media. So again, you can feel quite natural, quite normal. People can upload video selfies telling you what they want. They can kind of put in pictures and collages and diaries. And they have an add-on feature as well, where you can kind of track people through their website and stuff, and they can give you the data on that as well. But they're
nice.
They're pretty custom.
What was the name of that? Sorry.
And they're Irish, actually, no plug. Indemo, so I-N and then DEEMO. I should be able to put it in the chat, actually.
Okay.
Does that come up for you guys? There's loads of them. I'm sure there's lots of others, but we like them. The customer service is fantastic and a really good return investment from them as well. So they don't do the recruitment. There's another recruitment agency that we work with called Zest. Again, there's lots of them you can try out. LinkedIn is the holy grail of a lot of the stuff. That there's tons out there. And if you need recommendations afterwards, we're happy to help.
Great.
The chat facilities. What did you just type something in there? And Andrew, I didn't see any question earlier from there either. I've seen your good afternoon, but
you did. Yeah, I put the question to Deirdre actually.
Yeah, I've got nothing that's come through to me privately or actually on the and what Deirdre just put in there is not showing up on. Is it on anyone else?
Unless somehow it's coming to me because you made me a co-host. Maybe interfered with it. Maybe.
I don't know. Did Andrew's message go to you direct? Not sure. Can you
did my message go just to Andrew? Or maybe it is a direct message actually.
Oh, Andrew, you're the chosen one today. Did you have a message with that on then?
There we go. Now, there we go. Looks, I think it's the setting I had it
on.
Oh,
there we go. Yeah, it's on there now. I'm just checking that.
Now, can you see it come up?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so I think it went through as a direct message. Apologies. There we go. It's come up now. So indeed, with the research platform and Zest with the recruiters, and we work with a few different ones. But I just think for when we're doing small kind of skunk work stuff, those would be our two shorthands.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions?
No. I came in late, so I can't really.
That's right. Yeah, we'll get the I'll get the recording and everything sent over to you as soon as it's available there.
That's really interesting.
If you do think of anything after the call, you think you should ask that, then just drop us an email at AGP and we can forward it on to Deirdre and get her in touch with you or answer us direct.
Right.
Yeah, the last thing I'll leave you with, actually, we said to the team before, they said kind of how many people, again, it always depends on the objective and what you want to find out, but sometimes the inertia is that you feel like you've got to interview hundreds of people. Our rule of thumb is 4 or 5. 4 or 5 one-on-ones, incredible, of the right people, clearly. So have a think about what it is you want to learn and why, who it is that is going to be your target group, and just get 4 or 5 of them. Friends and family are great, but if they're not target, get rid of them. You want to go for target. And so, and the more you can identify the target, whether it's people who experience a certain thing today or, it's a competitor, whatever it is, the more specific you can make that kind of target specifics, and, recruiters can get them for you. But literally 4 or 5 people for an hour, gold dust. And just keep in your mind, what was that question I had, rather than getting distracted and trying to ask, 400 questions, because then you think, but maybe 1-2 things that I want to learn from this that are most important that I need to answer for the next stage of my project, or my product definition, etc. 4 or 5 conversations is very doable. And just back to Andrew, your point earlier around freelancers, actually, there's amazing qualitative freelancers and stuff. Even if you don't fancy doing it yourself, you could hire a qualitative researcher for half a day and they do the 4 interviews for you, and then maybe half a day analysis. So it's like a day of their time. and some recruitment, and then the payment for the respondents themselves. So,
I guess in a B2B, Deirdre, it's really critical who that person is, though, because you would be interviewing the person about their views rather than a B2C, where it's just all that matters is that person, if you like.
Yeah, and in the NHS example, we were looking for kind of managers of a certain level in a certain number of trusts. So we're looking at North England, we were looking at Wales, the South, so there were criteria of we needed at least people of this level with this many years experience in this geographical area, because the NHS trusts are managed differently and stuff as well. So you'd be surprised, I think, once you start to think through, you can kind of start to segment them and think, actually, no, my primary target is them. I'm going to start there.
Great. Thanks, Deirdre. Thanks, Deirdre, for giving up your time today. Can I just ask you, if you want a copy of the slides, can you pop your names in the chat thing there so I can take a note of them and get them sent over to you? You will have to sign your AG3s before I release them to you, so just keep a lookout for those, like I asked earlier. I think then again, if you think of anything that you wish you'd ask, then please don't forget get in touch with us and we can pop you across to Deirdre there. So fabulous, I've got a copy of the slides there. Fab, I'll get those sent out to you. So thanks everyone. Thanks Deirdre for giving up your time today. I've actually just sent those shoes to my friend who I was talking to yesterday about struggling with getting shoes on. So I've sent that over, and I'm well aware of health and her at the moment too. So it's been quite I normally just sit here and look for it, but I was very interested in that one. So
good. Yeah, the shoes are awesome. They're not cheap, but they are amazing. So
yeah, I just sent because literally last night, because she had a horrendous thing with a pedicure and you just wouldn't want to see the photos. The shoes would be absolutely perfect for us. So I got something out of this one too, which is cool.
Yeah,
so,
Fly Ease. Nike Fly Ease. I think that Fly Knit and Fly something else, but these ones are the Fly Ease.
Fabulous. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. You'll have yourself a cuppa and a sandwich now. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.